At 02:30 hours on October 25, 1944, Lieutenant Commander Richard O'Neill stood on the bridge of USS Tang in the Taiwan Strait, watching the wake of his final torpedo curve back toward his submarine. The torpedo had launched 20 seconds ago. It should have been heading straight for the Japanese transport ahead. Instead, it was turning left, making a wide circle through the dark water. Its phosphorescent wake was clearly visible against the Black Sea, and it was coming back, coming straight for Tang. O'Kane had 15 seconds to react, maybe 20. He just fired the 24th and final torpedo of Tang's 5th War Patrol. In 5 days of continuous combat, his submarine had sunk more Japanese tonnage than most boats managed in their entire war careers. But now, that last torpedo was malfunctioning. It was running in a circle, and there was nothing O'Kane could do to stop it. O'Kane shouted orders. Emergency flank speed, hard right, rudder. Tang's engines roared. The submarine began to accelerate. O'Kane was trying to outrun his own weapon, but Tang was already at attack speed. The acceleration wasn't fast enough. Through his binoculars, O'Kane watched the torpedo close the distance. He could see the white wake creeping nearer, the angle tightening, the geometry turning against him. He knew, calmly, clinically, with absolute certainty, that it would hit. His crew had performed flawlessly, his tactics had worked, his training had paid off. But none of it mattered now. One equipment failure, one stubbornly malfunctioning torpedo, was about to destroy the most successful submarine in United States Navy history. Richard O'Kane was 33 years old. Born February 2, 1911, in Dover, New Hampshire, he had graduated from the United States Naval Academy in 1934. His early career was spent on surface ships, first the heavy cruiser Chester, then the destroyer Pruitt. But in 1938, he transferred to submarine school in New London, Connecticut, a decision that changed everything. From the moment he stepped aboard, O'Kane understood submarines instinctively, how they moved, how they stalked, how they killed. He spent 4 formative years aboard the Argonaut, learning the trade from keel to periscope head. Then, in early 1942, he joined the pre-commissioning crew of a new fleet submarine, Wahoo. As executive officer, he served under Lieutenant Commander Marvin Kennedy during Wahoo's first 2 war patrols. They were maddening affairs. Torpedoes ran wide or failed to detonate. Promising attacks dissolved into empty ocean. Kennedy was a cautious skipper, a by-the-book officer who followed doctrine as though it were scripture. When Wahoo returned from those first patrols, she brought back little to show for the risks her crew had taken. Then Dudley Morton took command on December 31, 1942. Morton was unlike any submarine officer O'Kane had ever met. He was aggressive, intuitive, and utterly convinced that submarines were offensive weapons, built not to hide, but to kill. Before Wahoo's 3rd patrol, he gathered the crew and delivered a speech that would become legend. "Wahoo is expendable," he told them. "We will take every reasonable precaution, but our mission is to sink enemy shipping. If anyone does not want to go along under these conditions, see the yeoman. I'm giving him authority to transfer anyone who is not a volunteer. Nothing will ever be said about your remaining in port." Not a single man stepped forward. Morton's first innovation came before they even cleared the harbour. He approached O'Kane with a proposal so radical it bordered on heresy. He wanted to reverse the traditional command structure during attacks. Instead of the captain taking the periscope, the sacred prerogative of command, Morton wanted O'Kane to handle all periscope observations. Morton himself would run the plot, maintain situational awareness, and con the submarine. O'Kane would be the eyes, Morton would be the mind. It had never been done. No submarine captain relinquished the periscope. It was the focal point of command, the symbol of authority, But Morton saw what others had missed. By freeing himself from the narrow, distorted tunnel vision of the periscope, he could track the entire tactical picture. Multiple targets, escorts, firing opportunities, and escape routes, while O'Kane fed him rapid, precise observations. Morton explained it simply. "Now you're going to be my co-approach officer, not my assistant," Morton said. "You'll make all the approach and attack periscope observations. I'll con Wahoo to the best attack position, and then you'll fire the torpedoes." Morton paused. His stern expression softened into his familiar, disarming smile. "This way," he added. "I'll never get scared." O'Kane understood instantly. Morton trusted him completely, trusted him with the most critical element of submarine combat. It was a responsibility beyond anything O'Kane had ever been given. He answered simply, "I appreciate your confidence, Captain." That partnership changed everything. It transformed submarine warfare. On Wahoo's third patrol, in January 1943, they put the new system to its first test. Their assigned area was Wewak Harbor in New Guinea, a major Japanese staging base. The official mission was reconnaissance: observe, record, report. Morton had other plans. On January 24th, he took Wahoo straight into the harbor, submerged. It was madness. Entering an enemy anchorage underwater meant risking anti-submarine nets, shoal water, and the very real possibility of being trapped with no escape. But Morton believed the value of surprise outweighed every danger. Inside, they found the Japanese destroyer Harusame at anchor. Destroyers existed for one purpose: to hunt and kill submarines. Fast, maneuverable, bristling with sonar and depth charges, they were the most dangerous enemy a submarine could face. Attacking one, much less inside its own harbor, was unthinkable under standard doctrine. Morton ordered the attack anyway. O'Kane took the periscope. Calm, precise, disciplined, he called out ranges and bearings as Morton drove Wahoo into position. Morton conned Wahoo into firing position. They launched 6 torpedoes. The first 5 missed or malfunctioned, another infuriating reminder of the Mark 14's unreliability. But the 6th ran true. It struck Harusame amidships. The destroyer folded, broke in two, and slid under within minutes. Morton reversed course and took Wahoo out of the harbor at full speed. No depth charges followed, no pursuit. The Japanese were simply too stunned to react. It was the first time an American submarine had penetrated a defended harbor, sunk a warship, and escaped. 2 days later, Wahoo encountered a convoy, 3 freighters, a tanker, and the troop transport, Buyo Maru, all escorted. Morton attacked with relentless aggression, constantly shifting position while O'Kane fed him rapid, precise observations. They hit the tanker first, then a freighter, then Buyo Maru. The transport carried hundreds of Japanese soldiers. When it went down, survivors filled the water in rafts and lifeboats. Morton made a decision that would shadow his legacy. He ordered Wahoo to surface and open fire with the deck guns. His rationale was ruthless but tactical. Any soldier who reached shore would eventually return to combat and kill Americans. Morton chose to eliminate the threat at its source. The result was brutal. It violated long-standing norms of naval warfare, and after the war, the action became deeply controversial. But in the Pacific, where both sides fought with escalating ferocity, Morton viewed it as grim necessity. When Wahoo returned from that third patrol, the results were extraordinary. 8 ships confirmed sunk. It was unprecedented. Morton and O'Kane were hailed as heroes. Admiral Charles Lockwood, Commander Submarines Pacific, called Wahoo the finest submarine he had ever known. Morton was the ideal aggressive commander. O'Kane was the ideal executive officer. Together, they were unstoppable. O'Kane served on 4 more patrols under Morton, each one successful. Wahoo's tactics spread throughout the submarine force, imitated by skippers eager to match its successes. But no one could truly replicate what made the boat so deadly. The difference was the partnership, Morton and O'Kane. Complete trust. Instant, effortless communication. Each knew exactly what the other would do, even before he did it. They thought alike. When Morton saw a tactical opportunity, O'Kane was already moving to exploit it. When O'Kane called out an observation, Morton was already planning the response. Their timing was perfect, their instincts synchronized. But Morton pushed too hard. On Wahoo's 7th patrol in October 1943, he took the submarine into the Sea of Japan through La Pérouse Strait, one of the most dangerous passages in the Pacific. It was heavily mined, patrolled relentlessly, and hemmed in by shallows that left little room to maneuver. Even so, Morton pressed on, sinking 4 ships before attempting to exit through the same strait. That was when Wahoo was detected. Japanese patrol aircraft found her on the surface and attacked, dropping depth charges that hemmed her in and sealed her fate. Wahoo went down with all hands. 79 men died, Morton among them. O'Kane was not aboard. He had been transferred earlier that year and was in California overseeing the construction of his new command, Tang. When news of Wahoo's loss reached him, he was devastated. Morton had been his mentor, his teacher, and his friend, the man who had shown him what a submarine could do when handled with imagination and daring. Now Morton was gone. As O'Kane prepared to take command of Tang, he made himself a promise. He would fight the way Morton taught him. He would surpass Wahoo's record. He would make his captain proud. When O'Kane commissioned Tang on October 15, 1943, he intended not just to apply Morton's lessons, but to expand them. Morton had revolutionized how a captain and executive officer worked together. O'Kane would revolutionize how an entire crew fought. He began with training, relentless, exhausting, continuous training. Every officer, every petty officer, every enlisted man who touched the fire control system, every torpedoman, every watchstander, all of them trained over and over until it was instinct. O'Kane focused obsessively on one skill above all: periscope work. Speed and accuracy at the periscope. Most submarine commanders raised the scope briefly, made a quick observation, and ducked back down to avoid detection. O'Kane did not believe in quick. He believed in perfect. Raise the scope, look around, drop it fast before anyone spotted it. Standard doctrine emphasized caution. Minimize periscope exposure, present as little silhouette as possible. Don't give the enemy even a sliver of a chance to see you. O'Kane believed the opposite. He wanted his officers completely at ease at the periscope, fast, confident, accurate. He wanted them able to recognize ship types instantly, estimate range by eye, calculate angle on the bow without instruments, judge speed from nothing but the feel of a wake or the rhythm of a target's movement. To achieve that, he drilled them relentlessly. Every day, hour after hour, he summoned his officers to the conning tower. He held up silhouettes of Japanese ships, tankers, freighters, destroyers, escorts. How fast can you identify them? What's the tonnage? What's the probable speed? Angle on the bow, go. The officers learned to process visual information instantly. No hesitation, no uncertainty. O'Kane demanded perfection. If an officer couldn't identify a ship type in 3 seconds, they drilled until he could. If a range estimate was off by more than 200 yards, they practiced until it was dead accurate every time. O'Kane also trained his crew intensively for night surface attacks, a tactic he considered his specialty, the method he inherited from Morton and refined into an art. Most submarine commanders preferred submerged attacks, safer, more controlled, the boat harder to spot. But submerged attacks were slower, confined by limited periscope visibility, sluggish maneuvering, and restricted speed. O'Kane believed night surface attacks offered overwhelming advantages: maximum speed, full visibility, the ability to maneuver freely, the freedom to slash straight into the heart of a convoy and tear it apart from within. But night surface attacks required flawless coordination. Everyone had to know their job, execute without thinking, react instantly to a changing situation. O'Kane drilled his crew until they could conduct an entire night surface attack with almost no spoken communication. The radar operator called out contacts and ranges. The tracking party in the conning tower plotted positions and generated firing solutions. The torpedo room stood ready, fingers on the triggers. The engine room delivered maximum power the moment it was demanded. The diving officer prepared for an emergency submergence at a second's notice. Every man understood his role. Every man trusted the others. Tang moved like a single organism. Tang's first patrol in January 1944 would test everything O'Kane had built. Their assigned area was the Caroline and Mariana Islands. Tang departed Pearl Harbor on January 22nd. O'Kane felt the weight of it, his first patrol as commanding officer. Everything he had trained for, everything Morton had taught him, everything he had demanded of his crew, now it all had to prove itself in combat. Would his methods work? Would his crew perform? Would Tang deliver? The answer came on February 17th. Tang's radar picked up a convoy, 2 freighters, 5 smaller ships, multiple escorts. O'Kane brought Tang to the surface and slid ahead of the formation, positioning exactly where he wanted them. Let them come to him. Just as the range closed to attack distance, one of the escorts suddenly turned toward Tang. Range 7,000 yards, closing fast. They had been spotted. O'Kane ordered an emergency dive. Tang went down hard and fast. The escort charged in, dropping 5 depth charges. None were close. Tang was already deeper than the Japanese expected. O'Kane waited. He let the escort move off, then brought Tang back up to periscope depth. The convoy was still there, still moving, still vulnerable. O'Kane set up the attack. He called the bearings, ran the angles, calculated the solution. At 1,500 yards, he fired 4 torpedoes at the nearest freighter. 3 hit. Gyotan Maru, 6,800 tons, broke apart and went down by the stern. Tang dove deep again, cleared the area, then rose once more to reacquire the convoy. At dawn, O'Kane attacked a second time. By the end of that first patrol, Tang had fired all 24 torpedoes, scored 16 confirmed hits, and sunk 5 ships, 18,000 tons in total. O'Kane's training had worked. His crew had performed flawlessly. Tang returned to Pearl Harbor, having completed one of the most successful first patrols of the war. The second patrol would be different. No combat, just lifeguard duty off Truk. But it revealed O'Kane's character more clearly than gunfire ever could. On April 30th, 1944, American carrier aircraft struck Truk heavily. Japanese anti-aircraft fire was intense. Multiple pilots were shot down. Some bailed out, others ditched in the ocean surrounding the atoll. Tang was positioned outside the lagoon to rescue downed aviators. Then came the word, multiple pilots in the water. He brought Tang to the surface despite heavy Japanese fire from shore batteries. He used his deck guns to suppress enemy positions and maneuvered the submarine dangerously close to downed pilots struggling in the water. One by one, the crew hauled them aboard. By the end of the operation, Tang had rescued 22 men, 22 aviators who would otherwise have died or been captured. But that created a new problem. Tang wasn't designed to carry that many extra people. Her complement was 87. Now she carried 109. No extra bunks, no extra food, no extra space. Every compartment was packed with bodies and equipment. O'Kane made a decision. He ordered rations cut in half, for everyone, including himself. He gave his own cabin to the rescued pilots, surrendered his bunk, and slept on the deck. Tang made the 3,500-mile trip back to Pearl Harbor on half rations. Everyone was hungry, everyone was crowded, but all 22 pilots made it home. Admiral William Halsey personally thanked O'Kane and his crew. He awarded every member of Tang's crew the Navy Air Medal. Submariners wearing air medals became a running joke at reunions, but the pride was real. Tang's third patrol was legendary. Her assigned area, the Yellow Sea and the East China Sea. Extremely dangerous waters, shallow, heavily mined, and constantly patrolled. On June 20, 1944, southwest of Kagoshima, Tang encountered a massive convoy. 6 large ships guarded by 16 escorts. It was the most heavily defended formation O'Kane had ever seen. Standard doctrine said to avoid such targets. Too much risk, too many escorts, find easier prey. O'Kane ignored that doctrine. He waited for darkness, then struck, on the surface, charging straight into the heart of the formation. Tang fired her first spread of torpedoes at 2300 hours. 2 at one ship, 2 at another. All 4 hit. Massive explosions lit up the night, flinging fire and smoke across the water. O'Kane swung Tang through the convoy. Fired again, 2 more hits, 2 more explosions. Chaos reigned. Ships burned, escorts panicked, searchlights flailed across the darkness. Tang kept moving. O'Kane maintained control, calling out bearings, adjusting course, firing again. More hits, more explosions. By dawn, the smoke cleared. 4 ships were sinking. Post-war Japanese records confirmed it. Tamahoko Maru, Tainan Maru, Nasuzan Maru, Kenichi Maru. Over 16,000 tons destroyed in a single night. But O'Kane wasn't done. Later that patrol, Tang encountered another convoy, and then another. By the time she returned to Pearl Harbor on July 5th, she had sunk 10 ships in total. It was the most successful single submarine patrol of the entire war, more than any other boat had achieved. O'Kane received his 2nd Navy Cross. Tang earned a Presidential Unit Citation. The submarine force was stunned. What was O'Kane doing differently? How was Tang so devastatingly effective? Other commanders studied Tang's patrol reports. They interviewed O'Kane. They talked to his crew. The answer was always the same. Training, aggression, speed, trust. O'Kane trained his crew harder than anyone. He attacked more aggressively than anyone. He moved faster than anyone. And he trusted his crew completely. Those 4 factors made Tang unstoppable. Tang's 4th patrol took her to Japanese home waters, off the coast of Honshu, the enemy's front doorstep, from July 31st to September 3rd, 1944. These were the most dangerous waters imaginable. Every ship was a potential threat. Every patrol plane was hunting submarines. Every harbor had escorts ready to strike. O'Kane operated Tang with calculated daring. He attacked when opportunities presented themselves. He evaded when necessary. He sank 7 more ships, expending every torpedo, and returned empty-handed but victorious. By September 1944, Richard O'Kane was the most successful submarine commander in the Pacific. 4 patrols, 27 ships sunk, over 90,000 tons destroyed, 3 Navy Crosses, a Presidential Unit Citation. Tang was the hottest boat in the submarine force. Every officer wanted to serve under O'Kane. Every enlisted man wanted to be part of his crew. They were legends. But O'Kane was exhausted. 4 war patrols in 9 months, constant combat, relentless pressure. He had lost weight. Sleep eluded him. The stress was showing. His superiors suggested he take a break, let another officer command Tang on her next patrol. O'Kane refused. Tang was his boat, his crew, his responsibility. He would command her 5th patrol. Then maybe, just maybe, he would rest. The 5th patrol was supposed to be routine. Taiwan Strait, intercept Japanese shipping, standard mission. O'Kane received orders to join a wolf pack with 3 other submarines under Commander John Coy. Coordinated attacks, mutual support, safety in numbers. He declined. He had operated alone on every patrol. He trusted himself and his crew. He didn't need other boats slowing him down. He took Tang into the strait alone. Tang departed Pearl Harbor on September 24, 1944. After refueling at Midway, she pressed toward the Taiwan Strait, waters known to be heavily mined and patrolled. On October 10th, Tang sank 2 cargo ships. On October 23rd, she encountered a convoy, 3 tankers, 2 transports, 1 freighter, and numerous escorts. Night had fallen. O'Kane brought Tang to the surface and charged straight into the heart of the formation. At close range, there was no margin for error. Tang fired 8 torpedoes in rapid succession, 2 into the nearest tanker, 2 into a transport, 2 into another tanker, 2 into a freighter. All 8 found their targets. Explosions ripped through the convoy. Ships erupted in flames. 1 tanker exploded with such force that the blast rocked Tang. O'Kane kept moving, swinging Tang through the chaos, dodging burning ships and staying ahead of the escorts. A Japanese destroyer charged. O'Kane saw it coming. No time to dive. He turned Tang hard at maximum speed. The destroyer closed to ramming distance. Then it exploded. Either one of Tang's torpedoes struck, or another Japanese ship was caught in the havoc. The destroyer broke apart and sank. Tang cleared the area at flank speed. Behind them, 5 ships were sinking. 8 torpedoes fired, complete success. One of the most spectacular submarine attacks in naval history. Tang moved north, away from the Taiwan Strait, into deeper water. O'Kane gave his crew time to rest. They had been at battle stations for hours, exhausted but exhilarated. Shallow waters along the Chinese coast promised more traffic. Japanese convoys would hug the shoreline. O'Kane was right. On the evening of October 24th, Tang's radar picked up a large convoy. Multiple contacts. Big ships moving slowly along the coast. O'Kane studied the radar picture. This was exactly what Tang had come to find. He called his crew to battle stations. Tang would attack on the surface one last time. 2 torpedoes remained, and he intended to use them both. But there was a problem. American submarines in 1944 carried 2 main types of torpedoes, the Mark 14 steam torpedo and the Mark 18 electric torpedo. The Mark 14 was faster, had better range, but left a visible wake that enemy lookouts could spot. The Mark 18 was quiet, no wake, perfect for night surface attacks. O'Kane preferred the Mark 18. Tang's torpedo crews maintained their weapons obsessively. Every torpedo was tested, every system checked. But the Mark 18 had a flaw few knew about. Under certain conditions, its guidance system could malfunction. The torpedo could start a circular run, turning back toward the submarine that fired it. It had happened before. USS Tullaby had been sunk by her own torpedo on March 26, 1944, off Palau. Only 1 man survived from an 80-man crew. The Navy classified the incident. Most submarine commanders never learned the details. They knew circular runs were possible, but assumed they were rare. O'Kane knew the risk. Every submarine commander did. Standard doctrine was simple. After firing from the surface, crash dive immediately. Get deep. Get away from the launch point. O'Kane did not follow that doctrine. He stayed on the surface after attacks. He observed the results, watched his torpedoes hit, maintained control of the tactical picture. It was aggressive. It was dangerous. But it had worked. 5 war patrols, 33 ships sunk using his methods. Now those same tactics were about to kill him. The torpedo was 30 feet away. 20. O'Kane couldn't look away. Every man on the bridge was watching too. Lookouts, quartermaster, officer of the deck. All of them seeing their death approaching at 46 miles per hour. All of them knowing there was no escape. The Mark 18 struck Tang's aft torpedo room. 570 pounds of torpex detonated against the hull. The explosion was massive. A column of water shot 50 feet into the air. Blast waves ripped across the deck. Everything aft of the conning tower disintegrated in an instant. The torpedo room, after battery, crew spaces, engine rooms, maneuvering room, all gone. The 9 men on the bridge were hurled into the water. O'Kane felt himself lifted, thrown sideways. He hit the ocean hard. The impact knocked the air from his lungs. He went under. Salt water filled his mouth and nose. When he surfaced, gasping and choking, he could hear others, men calling out, swimming, drowning. Tang was right there, maybe 50 feet away. Her stern had vanished beneath the waves. Her bow was rising. The submarine was sinking fast. Inside the forward torpedo room, 30 men were still alive. They had felt the explosion, the shock wave. The lights went out. Emergency lighting kicked in. The intercom was dead. They didn't know what had happened. Some thought they had been depth-charged. Others feared a torpedo strike. Chief Torpedo's mate William Leibold took charge. He ordered all hatches sealed. He checked for flooding. The forward compartments were intact, but the entire aft section of the submarine was gone. There was no communication beyond the control room. Leibold realized the truth. They were alone, trapped. The only way out was up. Tang settled to the bottom, 180 feet down. The forward compartments had enough buoyancy to keep the bow slightly elevated, but the stern was planted firmly in the mud. The submarine rested at a slight angle, half buried, half floating in a grave of water and steel. Inside, the 30 survivors gathered in the forward torpedo room, the strongest compartment, the one most likely to withstand the pressure. Chief Leibold took command, organizing the men. They began burning classified documents, codebooks, cipher materials, patrol logs. Everything that could give the Japanese intelligence had to be destroyed. The work was methodical, almost ritualistic. They knew what was coming. Either they would escape, or they would die here, but they would give the enemy no advantage. O'Kane treaded water in the darkness. His binoculars had been lost in the fall. His life jacket kept him afloat. Around him, heads bobbed in the waves. He counted 3 others from the bridge. Lieutenant Lawrence Svadkin, officer of the deck. Floyd Cavalli, lookout. Hayes Trucker, helmsman. 4 men out of 9. He didn't know the fate of the others, dead in the explosion, drowned, or unconscious somewhere in the dark water. They swam toward each other, staying close. The sea was calm, but the water was cold. O'Kane knew they had maybe 6, 8 hours before hypothermia claimed them. After that, it wouldn't matter if anyone came looking. Above them, Tang was gone. The submarine had taken less than a minute to sink completely. All that remained on the surface were debris, floating wreckage, oil slicks, and somewhere below, 78 men, dead or dying. On the seabed, Tang's surviving crew faced a new battle, one against the crushing pressure, the darkness, and the clock. The depth was 180 feet, well within the range of the Momsen lung, the emergency escape device every submariner carried. The Momsen lung was essentially a rubber breathing bag with a mouthpiece and nose clip. A man could fill it with air from the submarine's pressurized atmosphere, then ascend slowly, exhaling continuously to avoid lung damage from expanding air. The device had been tested extensively, but never successfully in actual combat. Most submariners didn't trust it. They had heard the stories, men whose lungs ruptured during ascent, men who drowned in the escape trunk. The Momsen lung was supposed to work, but nobody really knew if it would. Chief Leibold knew they had to try. The alternative was staying inside Tang until the air ran out, a slow death from carbon dioxide poisoning. Leibold had been a submariner for 12 years. He had trained on the Momsen lung. He knew the procedures, but knowing and doing were very different things. He gathered the men and explained the plan. They would escape through the forward torpedo room escape trunk. It could hold maybe 3 men at a time. They would flood it, equalize the pressure, then open the hatch to the sea. Each man would ascend alone. No buddy system, no safety line. Just swim toward the surface and pray the Momsen lung worked. Then the Japanese arrived. Patrol boats overhead, hunting survivors, hunting wreckage, trying to confirm the kill. They dropped depth charges. Not many, just a few, but close enough to shake the hull. In the forward torpedo room, paint blistered on the bulkheads from the concussion. Equipment jarred loose. Sparks flew. A fire ignited in the forward battery, sending smoke and toxic fumes curling through the compartment. The men's window for escape was closing fast. The men fought the fire with extinguishers and brought it under control, but the air was deteriorating rapidly. They had to leave. At 0600 hours, 13 men began their escape attempt. They entered the escape trunk in groups of 3, flooded the chamber, and equalized the pressure. Their ears screamed from the sudden change. They opened the hatch. The sea rushed in, black and cold. One by one, they pushed off, swimming upward through the darkness. The Momsen lung functioned. They exhaled continuously, rising toward the surface. Some made it. Others didn't. Lungs ruptured. Consciousness failed. They drowned 10 feet from the surface. Of the 13 men who left Tang, only 5 survived to reach the air above. O'Kane had been in the water for 8 hours. The sun was rising. He was barely conscious. Hypothermia had set in. His body temperature was falling. His thinking was sluggish, confused. He didn't see the Japanese patrol boat until it was right on top of him. Sailors leaned over the rail, shouting in Japanese, tossing down a line. O'Kane grabbed it. He had no strength to climb. They hauled him aboard like a fish and laid him on the deck. Above him, Japanese faces glared. They knew who he was. They knew what Tang had done. The beating started immediately. Fists, boots, rifle butts. They struck him in the face, the ribs, the back. He couldn't defend himself, too weak, too cold. He curled up, trying to protect his head, trying to stay conscious. Around him, other Americans lay on the deck, survivors of Tang, also being beaten. The Japanese were furious. Tang had sunk dozens of their ships, killed hundreds of their sailors, and now they had the crew, and they were taking their revenge. In total, 9 of Tang's crew survived, 3 from the bridge, 5 who escaped the forward torpedo room, and O'Kane himself. 9 out of 87. 78 men dead. The most successful submarine in American naval history was gone, sunk by her own weapon. It was an ending nobody had imagined. Tang was supposed to return to Pearl Harbor victorious, refit, and go back to war. Instead, she lay at the bottom of the Taiwan Strait, a tomb for 78 submariners. The Japanese took the survivors ashore, first to a local military facility, then to Ofuna, a secret interrogation camp outside Yokohama. Ofuna was run by the Japanese Navy. It did not exist in any official records. It was unregistered with the International Red Cross. No prisoner lists, no Geneva Convention protections, no oversight. The camp was designed specifically for high-value prisoners. Submarine commanders, pilots, intelligence officers, men who had information the Japanese desperately wanted. The interrogation methods were systematic and brutal. O'Kane was questioned for days. The questions were always the same. How deep can American submarines dive? What is their maximum operating depth? How do your fire control systems work? What are your torpedoes' technical specifications? O'Kane gave nothing. Name, rank, serial number, that was all, nothing else. The interrogators beat him, withheld food, denied water, and forced him into stress positions for hours. It didn't matter. O'Kane refused to cooperate. He had commanded the most successful submarine in the Navy. He had sunk 33 Japanese ships. He would not help the enemy kill more Americans by revealing submarine secrets. The other Tang survivors endured the same treatment. All 9 men were interrogated repeatedly. The Japanese were particularly interested in the submarine's diving capacity. Their own submarines could not match the depth of American boats, and they wanted every detail. The enemy wanted to know why. What technology did the Americans have? The Tang survivors said nothing. They endured the beatings, the starvation, the psychological torture. They stuck together, supported each other, refused to break. Ofuna was nicknamed the Torture Farm by the prisoners who survived it. The camp held about 120 men at any given time, submariners, pilots, high-value targets. The guards were deliberately cruel. Beatings were daily. Food was minimal, 1 meager meal a day, maybe 600 calories. Men lost weight rapidly. Disease spread unchecked. Dental infections, dysentery, respiratory illnesses. Medical care was non-existent. If a prisoner got sick, he either recovered on his own or died. The Japanese didn't care which. O'Kane watched other prisoners die, saw men waste away from starvation, saw men beaten until they could no longer stand, saw men lose hope and give up. But he didn't. He had survived Tang's sinking. He had survived 8 hours in the ocean. He could survive this. He focused on staying alive, 1 day at a time. He memorized details, guard rotations, camp layout, prisoner locations. He didn't know if it would ever be useful, but it gave him something to focus on, something to keep his mind sharp. In late 1944, O'Kane and several other Tang survivors were transferred to a Mori prisoner of war camp. Omori was different from Ofuna. It was a legitimate POW camp, registered with the International Red Cross. But legitimate didn't mean humane. Omori was known throughout the Japanese prison system as a punishment camp. The worst prisoners were sent there, the most troublesome, the most valuable, the ones the Japanese wanted to break completely. The camp was built on an artificial island in Tokyo Bay, connected to the mainland by a bamboo bridge. About 600 prisoners lived there. By 1945, conditions were deteriorating. Food supplies were shrinking. Guards were becoming more brutal, and the air raids by American B-29s were constant. The guards blamed the prisoners for every bombing, adding another layer of terror. The beatings intensified. One guard stood out, Corporal Mutsuhiro Watanabe. The prisoners called him the Bird. He was the camp's disciplinary officer, a sadist who took pleasure in inflicting pain. He singled out individual prisoners and beat them repeatedly, focusing especially on high-value targets, officers, pilots, submarine commanders. O'Kane became one of the Bird's primary targets. Watanabe knew O'Kane's record, knew about the ships Tang had sunk. He made it his mission to break him. He called O'Kane #1 prisoner, beat him every day, forced him to perform extra labor, denied him food, humiliated him in front of other prisoners. The Bird wanted O'Kane to beg, to cry, to break down, to show weakness. O'Kane refused. He took the beatings without complaint, never showed emotion, never gave the Bird the satisfaction. His defiance made the sadist angrier and the beatings worse. But O'Kane would not break. The other Tang survivors watched him. They saw how he handled the torture, saw his strength. It gave them strength too. If their commander could survive this, they could survive as well. They stuck together, helped each other, shared food when they had any. The Japanese tried to break them individually, but the men of Tang remained a crew, even in a prison camp, even facing death every day. The war was ending. Everyone knew it. American bombers flew over Omori constantly. By August 1945, Japan was collapsing. Atomic bombs fell on Hiroshima on August 6th and Nagasaki on August 9th. The Soviet Union entered the war. Japanese cities burned. On August 15th, Emperor Hirohito announced Japan's surrender. The guards at Omori heard the broadcast. The Japanese didn't tell the prisoners immediately, but the men knew something had changed. The guards were different, less aggressive, more nervous. On August 29th, American forces arrived at Omori. Landing craft crossed Tokyo Bay, Marines and sailors armed and ready. The Japanese guards surrendered without a fight. The prisoners were free. O'Kane had been a prisoner for 10 months. He had lost over 50 pounds. He was skeletal, covered in bruises, and sick with dysentery, but he was alive. All 9 Tang survivors had survived. They had made it through Ofuna, through Omori, through torture, starvation, and disease. They were going home. The Navy debriefed O'Kane extensively. They wanted every detail about Tang's final patrol, the circular run, the sinking, and the escape attempt. O'Kane reconstructed everything from memory. His patrol logs had gone down with Tang. He had no documents, no notes, just his memory and the memories of the other survivors. Together, they pieced together Tang's final hours. The Navy investigated the torpedo failure. They examined the Mark 18's design and reviewed previous circular run incidents. They concluded that the torpedo's gyroscope system had a fundamental flaw. Under certain conditions, usually involving surface launches at high speed, the gyroscope could tumble. When that happened, the torpedo's steering went haywire. It could turn in any direction, even back toward its launch point. Rare but real, and deadly. The Navy also reviewed Tang's combat record. O'Kane had officially been credited with sinking 24 ships during Tang's 5 patrols, but the evidence suggested more. After the war, American researchers gained access to Japanese naval records, shipping logs, convoy reports, and loss reports. They cross-referenced American claims with Japanese losses. The results were extraordinary. Tang had actually sunk 33 ships, not 24. 33. Total tonnage, 116,454 tons. It was the highest total for any American submarine in the entire war, both in number of ships sunk and in total tonnage. Tang was number 1, and Richard O'Kane was the most successful submarine commander in United States naval history. On March 27, 1946, President Harry Truman presented O'Kane with the Medal of Honor. The ceremony was at the White House. O'Kane stood on the lawn in full dress uniform as Truman read the citation aloud. It described Tang's actions on October 23 and 24, 1944. How O'Kane had boldly maneuvered on the surface into the midst of heavily escorted convoys. How he had stood in a fusillade of bullets and shells from all directions. How he had launched devastating hits on 3 tankers. How he had been boxed in by blazing tankers, a freighter, a transport, and several destroyers. And how he had charged the enemy at high speed, exploding a tanker in a burst of flame, smashing a transport dead in the water, and blasting a destroyer. The citation recounted that he had expended his last 2 torpedoes into the remnants of a once powerful convoy before his own ship went down. It called his actions conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of life above and beyond the call of duty. O'Kane also received 3 Navy Crosses and 3 Silver Stars, a total of 7 of the highest American military decorations for valor in combat. It was an extraordinary collection of awards. But O'Kane didn't talk about the medals much. When people asked, he changed the subject, always talking instead about his crew. The men of Tang, the 78 who didn't come home, the 9 who survived, their training, their battles, the price they had paid. O'Kane stayed in the Navy. He commanded the submarine tender Peleus in the Pacific Reserve Fleet. He testified at war crimes trials in Tokyo. His testimony helped convict several Japanese officers who had committed atrocities against prisoners. The camp commandant at Ofuna was sentenced to 25 years of hard labor. Watanabe, the bird from Omori, was never captured. He disappeared after the war and went into hiding. The Americans hunted him for years but never found him. Eventually, he resurfaced in the 1950s, living under his own name in Japan. By then, the war crimes trials were over. He was never prosecuted. O'Kane continued his naval career. He served as executive officer of the submarine tender Nereus and commanded Submarine Division 32. He attended the Armed Forces Staff College from 1950 to 1951. He was assigned to the submarine school in New London, Connecticut, first as an instructor, then as officer in charge. In July 1953, he was promoted to captain and commanded the submarine tender Sperry. In June 1954, he took command of Submarine Squadron 7. He studied at the Naval War College from 1955 to 1956 and later served on the Ship Characteristics Board in Washington. In July 1957, at age 46, Richard O'Kane retired from the United States Navy. He was promoted to Rear Admiral on the retired list. He spent his retirement in California. In 1977, he published Clear the Bridge, a memoir of Tang's war patrols. The book was written from memory, but O'Kane's memory was precise. He described each patrol in meticulous detail, capturing the skill, courage, and sacrifice of his crew, and preserving the legacy of the most successful submarine in American naval history. The attacks, the tactics, the training, the crew, the successes, and the failures. Clear the Bridge captured it all. O'Kane's memoir became a classic of submarine literature. Captain Edward Beach, himself a submarine commander and author of Run Silent, Run Deep, wrote the introduction. Beach wrote that there was no doubt Tang was the best submarine of the war. He wondered what Tang had that other boats didn't, and O'Kane's book answered the question. Aggressive leadership, relentless training, calculated risk-taking, and absolute trust between commander and crew. In 1987, O'Kane published Wahoo, a second memoir recounting his time as executive officer under Dudley Morton. The book described how Morton had revolutionized submarine tactics, how he had reversed traditional roles by letting O'Kane man the periscope during attacks, how he had given O'Kane the freedom to develop his skills, and how he had trained him to become the commander he eventually became. Wahoo was Morton's submarine, but it was also O'Kane's training ground. Everything O'Kane learned from Morton, he later applied to Tang. The aggressive tactics, the night surface attacks, the relentless drilling, the trust in subordinates. Morton died when Wahoo was sunk, but his methods lived on through O'Kane. Throughout his retirement, O'Kane stayed connected to the submarine community. He attended reunions, spoke at submarine school graduations, and mentored young officers. His message was always the same: train hard, trust your crew, be aggressive but calculated, take risks but minimize them through preparation, know your equipment, drill until perfection is automatic, lead from the front, and never ask your men to do anything you wouldn't do yourself. The 9 Tang survivors stayed in touch. They held reunions every year, remembering the men who had died, talking about the patrols, the attacks, the training, the sinking, and the imprisonment. Through these memories, the legacy of Tang, her crew, and her extraordinary commander endured. They were bound together by what they had experienced. No one else could understand the terror of the circular run, the explosion, the sinking, the men trapped inside, the beatings at Japanese hands, the starvation, the torture, and the struggle for survival. They had lived through something most men could not imagine. Richard O'Kane died on February 16, 1994, at his home in Sebastopol, California, at the age of 83. He was buried at Arlington National Cemetery with full military honors. His grave is marked with his rank, Rear Admiral, his dates of service, and the Medal of Honor designation. Hundreds attended the funeral: submariners, veterans, family members, men who had served with him, men inspired by him. Everyone present understood they were saying goodbye to a legend. In 1999, the Navy commissioned USS O'Kane, an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer named in his honor. At the commissioning ceremony, surviving Tang crew members stood at attention. They were old men, in their 70s and 80s, but they saluted as O'Kane's widow christened the ship. O'Kane had achieved something no other submarine commander had matched. 33 ships sunk, the highest total in American naval history. A record that still stands. The O'Kane cribbage board had become a submarine force tradition. The original board, used by Morton and O'Kane on Wahoo, was lost when Tang sank. That board had been legendary. Morton had dealt O'Kane a perfect 29-hand during a patrol. That same night, Wahoo sank 2 freighters. A few days later, Morton dealt O'Kane a 28-point hand, and Wahoo sank 3 more ships. The crew believed the board was lucky. When O'Kane took command of Tang, he continued the tradition. In 1957, the crew of a new submarine, also named Tang, presented O'Kane with a replacement cribbage board to honor the original. After his death in 1994, that board was passed to the oldest fast-attack submarine in the United States Pacific Fleet, a living testament to his legacy. When that submarine decommissions, the cribbage board transfers to the next oldest boat. It is carried in the wardroom, and officers play cribbage on it. The tradition continues. Every submariner who serves aboard the boat carrying O'Kane's board learns the story of Wahoo and Tang, of Morton and O'Kane, of the 33 ships sunk, the Medal of Honor, the circular run, the survival, the legend. The wreck of Tang has never been found. She lies somewhere in the Taiwan Strait, 180 feet beneath the waves. The exact location was noted in Tang's final position report, but it was only approximate. The Taiwan Strait is difficult to search, and political tensions between China and Taiwan limit access. Salvage operations are unlikely. Tang will probably remain there forever, a war grave for 78 men, the most successful submarine in American naval history, resting on the seafloor where she fell. O'Kane's tactics became standard doctrine in the submarine force. Night surface attacks, aggressive positioning, charging into the middle of convoys, using speed and surprise to overwhelm the enemy. These methods were controversial during the war, and some commanders thought O'Kane was too reckless. But the results spoke for themselves. Tang sank more ships than any other submarine, and O'Kane's methods worked. After the war, the Navy studied his patrols extensively, incorporating many of his techniques into submarine warfare doctrine. Training programs emphasized the principles O'Kane had demonstrated: speed, aggression, precision, and trust. Today, modern submarine commanders still study O'Kane's patrols as exemplary lessons in effective submarine warfare. The story of Tang is taught at the Naval Academy, at submarine schools, and in officer training programs. It is presented as a case study in leadership, tactics, and the price of innovation. O'Kane was a brilliant commander who pushed his crew to achieve the impossible. He sank 33 enemy ships in 9 months. He rescued 22 downed pilots under fire. He survived imprisonment and torture. He received the Medal of Honor and became the most decorated submarine commander in American history. But he also lost 78 men when his own torpedo turned against him. That loss haunted O'Kane for the rest of his life. In interviews during his retirement, he rarely spoke about his awards or his record. He spoke about the men instead: the crew of Tang, the crew of Wahoo, the men who had trained with him, fought with him, and died with him. He remembered their names, where they were from, their jobs aboard the submarine, their personalities. O'Kane could recall details about men he had served with 40 years earlier. He kept in touch with as many as he could, wrote letters, made phone calls, attended funerals. He never forgot that his success had been built on their skill and sacrifice. That is how exceptional leadership works in war, not through grand strategies or perfect plans, but through men who push themselves and their teams beyond what anyone thought possible. O'Kane didn't invent submarine warfare, but he perfected it. He learned from Dudley Morton on Wahoo and adapted those lessons to Tang. He trained his crew harder than anyone else, drilling them until they could execute attacks with split-second precision. He took risks that other commanders avoided and achieved results that seemed impossible. And when it all came crashing down, when his own weapon destroyed his submarine, he survived. He endured imprisonment. He came home. He continued serving. He mentored the next generation, passing on the lessons he'd learned, the tactics that worked, the training methods that produced results, and the leadership principles that made ordinary men extraordinary. If you found this story as compelling as we did, please take a moment to like this video. It helps us share more forgotten stories from the Second World War. Subscribe to stay connected with these untold histories. Each one matters, each one deserves to be remembered. We'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment below telling us where you're watching from. Thank you for watching, and thank you for keeping these stories alive.